Hello my fellow Hollowed Hunters, this is the Souls Fanatic, and today I will show you how to make the Pebble from Bloodborne. Before we begin, a list of materials and tools is provided down in the video's description below, as well as time skips to each step pinned as the top comment. This is my first video in my new format, and I would like to hear your opinion down in the comments. I will try to talk more freely, and captions are now available if you choose. But without further ado, let's get started. For our first step, we will be mixing clay to create the color of our pebble. You will need black and white polymer clay. The brand doesn't really matter. I like Craftsmart because it's the cheapest. However, you can use whichever brand you prefer. I will begin by taking a 1:8 ratio of black to white clay. That's 8 parts white for every 1 part black, and then mixing them together. Alternatively, you could just buy gray clay and skip this step entirely, but this is a good time to practice mixing and matching clay colors for future projects down the line. While I was observing the item in-game, I noticed that the pebble is actually a petrified eyeball. However, it is much too large to be any human eye. While it's entirely possible within game to find some hideous monstrosity with such large eyes, it doesn't quite translate well into real life, and looks a bit unrealistic. When making any kind of prop, especially ones taken from an alternative media like video games, it's important to consider the real-world equivalents. I chose to take the middle ground and make enough clay for a slightly larger-than-life eye, a sphere of about 3 centimeters in diameter. However, if you want the exact in-game version, then you want enough clay to make a sphere roughly the size of a baseball, at about 6 centimeters in diameter. Then we will take a small amount of clay, 3 parts black, 2 parts white, and mix them together. This will become the slightly darker pupil found at the center of the pebble. For our second step, we'll shape the pebble. You will need a ballpoint embossing stylus and a sharp hole puncher. Alternatively, you can probably just use a toothpick. You will also need a small clean sheet of coarse grit sandpaper. I am using 80 grit, however you should be fine using anything close. If you haven't done so already, we will roll the clay into a sphere. We will then take our hole puncher, jab it into the sphere, and begin swirling it in a circular motion to create a concave cone. Now we will take the side of the hole puncher and gently detail the sides of the cone with lines to represent the iris. Eyeballs appear to be plain spheres, however in actuality the iris and pupil are in fact concave. It is the protective cornea that is convex to create the sphere. For our pebble, it seems that the cornea is missing. We will now use the sharp end of the hole puncher to scratch some cracks into our pebble. For the most part, the pebble displayed in-game seems to be rather smooth. Most of the cracks that do appear on the pebble go from the iris out. If you plan on making multiple pebbles, this seems to be a good opportunity to give some variety to the size and shape of each crack. Creating slight defects in each piece gives a sense of realism in that no two eyes are the same. Then we will take the small, darker clay, roll it into a ball, and push it into the center of the cone with the ballpoint stylus. We will smooth out the seams and create the pupil. Finally, we will lay out our coarse sandpaper and gently roll our pebble along the sandpaper to give it a rough stone texture. Try to avoid squishing your iris on the paper, as this could be difficult to fix. When everything looks good and you're happy with your sculpt, you can bake the clay to the required time and temperature of your specific polymer clay. This should be listed on the packaging of your clay, and if not, you may need to look up the correct time and temperature online because it is different for each brand. For our third step, we will be adding the finishing touches. You will need black satin flat paint, paint thinner, paintbrush, and a scrap cloth. I am using Tester's modeling paint as I found that this is the best paint for sticking to polymer clay. However, with the downside that it dries much slower. You do not have to use Tester's specifically. You should be able to use virtually any paint brand, but I do recommend that you use a satin or, in Tester's case, flat black. Satin paint looks rough and makes better shading for a stone surface. So we will take our bake-hardened pebble, our brush, and begin painting in the cracks of the pebble. We will then take the scrap cloth and wipe away the extra, leaving the paint in the scratches. If the paint dries early, dab your scrap cloth in the paint thinner and gently wipe the excess paint away. As I said before, Tester's takes a few days to properly dry. Your paint may be quicker, but be sure to allow your project the proper drying time before handling, and keep it away from dust. Now we can look in awe at our fabulous finished pebble. I don't recommend throwing it at people. Thrilling it may be, you will definitely get into trouble. I know this was rather a simple and boring build, but I wanted an easy project to test my new format. Feel free to leave a like if you want to see more, or a dislike and tell me what I can improve upon down in the comments. Subscribe and hit the notification icon to keep updated on all my uploads. And if you really like my content, perhaps you can help support me on Patreon for some extra content and perks. Link will be in the description. Thanks for watching.